This is the OFN Today as we talk Tampa Bay Buccaneers football on the Our Lads Football Network with David Harrison. David is the writer for BucksNation.com at SBNation.com and also the co-host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. David, good talking to you again.
Yeah, good talking to you too, Greg. How you
I've been
been?
all right. And how about you? The Bucks, hopefully, if we have ourselves a season, this is the season. Well, actually, if you think about it, the Bucks have not had a playoff win since their Super Bowl season. That was back in what, 2002. So you'd have to believe that this could be the biggest season since 2002.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, when you look at players, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have seen come and go. I mean, quarterback Josh Freeman was kind of an up and comer until he his stock kind of plummeted a little bit there, and then you had hot coaches like Raheem Morris, that the young gun who's going to come in and bring a little bit of style and swagger to the team and help them reach a new level that didn't work out. Of course, you got guys like Mike Evans and Levante David, fan favorites, and Mike Evans, nationally known. Levante David getting a little bit more attention this offseason as a more underrated player on the national stage. Those guys have never seen playoff football. So to think that, especially a guy like Mike Evans, who's in the argument, most often for being maybe a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, has never seen postseason football. So this is a huge opportunity for the entire roster, but specifically for some of these young guys and some of these Buccaneers who honestly just deserve playoff football, even if the team doesn't make the Super Bowl. I know that's the end goal, but even if they don't make it there, the opportunity to make the playoffs
Yes.
alone is just incredibly huge.
Now, with the virus and every state being different, and from what we've heard, the NFL has said, and I haven't heard them change their mind, but they said if it's up to us, we're going to allow half of every stadium to be filled. It's up to the governor of every state or the owner of the team, whatever. And it sure sounds like the governor of Florida is an open kind of guy to allowing fans to show up to games, isn't he? I mean, is there a possibility that when Bucks play home games that you'll have the place half full?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about half full, but I think 30% full at least is a reasonable target. I mean, I think that if it's possible for fans to be in Raymond James Stadium, then I think that the state of Florida, the team, the city of Tampa is going to do everything in their power to allow that to happen and to put measures in place that are going to protect not only the fans but also the team and even Raymond James. I mean, from liability, liability is a part of this whole thing. Of course, we actually had sports lawyer Dan Lust on our show to talk about some of those things. And the little ticket stub that you get or the email that you get has a lot of fine print on there, including things that absolve the team and the
Okay.
stadium sponsor from liability should you get hurt. And I'm sure there's going to be some things that if you were to get
Yes.
ill from attending a Buccaneers games that will protect them, but then also allow the opportunity for fans who want to
Yep.
come in and brave the risk, I guess, if you want to put it that way, the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, this would be one of those situations where if any fan happens to go to a game at one of these stadiums and gets sick and then wants to sue the team, you can be sure that 99.9% of the fan base is going to be for the team. They're going to be, hey man, you had your opportunity to go and you took the chance, but come on. Because I got to think too, if there is especially in Tampa, if there is a limit of any sort on tickets, that's going to be like, hey, every man for himself to get those tickets. I mean, I can't imagine there's going to be if they could sell out every seat this season, I can't imagine there'll be a seat available.
Yeah, when you talk about just poor timing, obviously it's poor timing for everybody. There's no such thing as good timing for something like what's going on. But you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers franchise and these fans, and the stadium has been half full and full of road team fans a lot very often in the last few years, last decade really. So for this to be the year, the saying there used to be a slogan, "It's a Bucks life," and that's kind of become a rallying cry for Buccaneers fans. And so it's kind of like, oh, the Bucks get Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski. You got Bruce Arians, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and of course the stadiums would be half capacity or 1/3 capacity even possibly. The good news for season ticket holders anyway is that they've been told they're going to get priority on the single game tickets as they come available when they come available. So at least those season ticket people are going to have the opportunity to get in
Great.
there. There's some concerns about resale values and people taking advantage of the situation, buying tickets and then flipping them for enormous costs. But all those injuries are going to kind of come, and people are going to have to decide, is it really worth the cost and the expense to see Tom Brady lead these Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home?
All right, now speaking of Evans and Godwin, this offense, of course, OJ Howard, uh, McCoy is now on board along with Ronald Jones. So, but really, Evans and Godwin are the interesting cases, including Evans, because we don't know about Tom Brady's ability to throw the ball down the field. I mean, we have seen it in New England over the last few years. I mean, it seems like every time you throw a ball down the field, I mean, he's lucky if he would complete like 10 or 20%. He's not capable of doing that much anymore. So that's going to be interesting. Whereas Jameis Winston had that ability, we all know all the negative issues that Winston had, but those are one of the traits that Winston had an edge over Tom at this stage of their careers, throwing the ball down the field. So it will be interesting to see how this Bruce Arians offense fits with what Tom Brady did under Josh McDaniels.
Right, and that's something that's come up, quite often. But another part of that is, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but Jameis Winston's longest air completion of 2019, really, I think it was about 7 or 8 yards longer than Tom Brady's longest air completion of 2019. So, I mean, in reality, in the execution phase of everything, Jameis Winston's longest pass completion, the ball going from his hand to the receiver, really wasn't that much longer than Tom Brady's was. And Tom Brady certainly has the ability to get the ball downfield 50, 60 yards if he needs to. Now, I wouldn't ask him to do it if I'm Bruce Arians or Byron Leftwich nearly as much as you can a young arm like Jameis Winston. And Jameis certainly does have a stronger arm at this point in each of their careers, and he's going to get the ball down there faster. If you have Jameis Winston throw a 50-yard pass and Tom Brady, I think Jameis's pass is going to get there, a shade faster than Tom Brady's is. So that certainly plays into it a little bit as well, some of the anticipation. But I think where Tom makes up for maybe that slower ball getting deeper, or maybe the inability to throw the ball 70 yards downfield, 4 or 5 times a game, is his ability to anticipate. If he can complete a pass 35 or 45 yards downfield to where his receiver has the space and the separation from his defender and the ability to take that pass and that catch at the 45-yard mark and run it the extra 30 yards, he doesn't need to throw it 75 yards. At the same time, where Jameis Winston has the arm to certainly go deep and hit the big play, time and time again, Tom Brady has the experience and the knowledge to know when to take the dump off, when to hit the short yard route and live for the next down, and maybe get 3 yards on 1st and 10 instead of going for a 25-yard completion every time. And that's something that I think is going to be incredibly important, because Bruce Arians has said that even though his offense has a reputation of having deep routes, and believe me, almost every pass play is going to have a designed deep route, there are short routes in Bruce Arians' system. It's on the quarterback to read the defense and make the smart decision for the team.
And Edelman's not with Brady at this point, but Gronk is, and that is a huge help for Tom. But I got to ask too, who will be the James White for Tom? Is that going to be? Is it supposed to be Jones? Is he the guy?
Yeah, it's going to be Rojo. I mean, Rojo's going to get the first crack at it. I think when you see the Buccaneers bringing in a guy like LaShawn McCoy, it's hard to deny the connection between a guy like Tom Brady and running backs that can do some damage out of the backfield as a receiver. And then you look at LaShawn McCoy, who's got that open space danger or that threat to him, even at 31 years of age. If you get LaShawn McCoy in space against a defender one-on-one, I think probably 7 out of 10 times that defender is going to lose. But Ronald Jones has a whole lot of agility to him. He's got a whole lot of burst to him. We saw him do some good things in the passing game last year. People seem to forget a little bit that Ronald Jones did net over 1,000 yards of offense last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It wasn't all in the running game. It wasn't all in the passing game. It was a little bit of each. But he did amass over 1,000 yards. Now this year, Ronald Jones, speaking to the media just the other day, his goal is to get 1,000 yards on the ground, and then whatever he can get in the passing game on top of it. So I think when you look at the Buccaneers stable of running backs, the most James White-like running back is definitely Ronald Jones. I think, as big of a fan as I am of James White, honestly, I think Ronald Jones has the ability to do even bigger things with fewer touches than a guy like James White.
Now, Jones, what was he? Caught behind the line of scrimmage 13 times, I believe, last year. Is that more of a young running back not hitting the holes quicker, whether there's a hole or not, and he's caught behind the line, or is that more of an offensive line issue?
I think it's a little bit of a combination of a few things. One of them certainly could be Ronald Jones just not having the full understanding of, let's say, a veteran running back and reading the defense, knowing kind of where to go once he gets the ball, where to anticipate the defenders coming through. Another part of that is certainly the offensive line. Alex Kappa, the starting right guard, has another year under his belt coming into this season, having a full year as a starter there at the right guard position. So he's going to be, you expect him to be a little bit more improved and be able to do more effective things in the running game. Ali Marpet returns on the left side. Ryan Jensen is still a dog there at the center position. And then you got Tristan Wirfs on the right side. DeMar Dotson leaving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not returning this year. Veteran right tackle. He's been a solid, position player, a solid part of that locker room, but even to his own admission, doesn't like run blocking as much as maybe you expect an offensive lineman to enjoy run blocking. Tristan Wirfs is a young guy. He's hungry, looking to prove himself, looking to prove that he's worthy of that 14th overall draft pick. So you have an offensive line who not only is looking to prove that they're better than maybe people expect them to be, but you've got young guys who are anxious to step up. And then, playing in front of Tom Brady,
yeah.
if you can't have any more motivation to step up your game than that, I don't know what you're doing in this business.
Yeah, and great quarterbacks can make the offensive linemen look a little better as well. And so they can right now, maybe they're coming off of a year where they were all some of the guys were average to slightly above average, but a Tom Brady could make them look really above average, especially if everybody's working together. And Wirfs is one of the new guys. It was incredible. We talked about this after the draft. Incredible that the Bucs were able to find Wirfs where they found him as the final left tackle prospect out of that initial first group of left tackle prospects. It's just amazing. And obviously he's going to start on the right side, but he's got the ability to play both. But still, he has the ability to easily be the best offensive lineman in this draft.
Oh, most definitely. And I know a lot of people have Tristan Wirfs ranked as either their first or second offensive tackle in this class out of those, out of that top four coming into the draft weekend, and then to have Andrew Thomas become the first offensive tackle off the board certainly surprised a lot of people. Not necessarily that it was the New York Giants that pulled the trigger on the position, but just the fact that it was Andrew Thomas's name. I know I was a little bit surprised by it. Most people had Andrew Thomas as kind of the fourth guy. I honestly had Andrew Thomas as my second ranked prospect behind Tristan Wirfs. Tristan was actually my favorite offensive tackle of the group. So, to see him become the fourth guy off the board, to see him land in Tampa, and then, they had to trade up one spot with John Lynch, shades of the trade they made with the Chicago Bears when they moved up for Trubisky. But, I'm 100% confident that this move to get Tristan Wirfs is going to work out a lot better than that other one spot trade.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, let's talk. Well, first of all, OJ Howard. Now with Gronk there, what can that do for Howard? Because everybody's been waiting for Howard to break out. And even though Winston was a younger quarterback, maybe with a stronger arm at this point in his career, tight end position's different. Tom Brady loves his tight ends. And even though he's got Gronk, this is such a great opportunity for OJ Howard. This has got to be the year that OJ Howard shows everybody what he has.
I don't know that this is the year that OJ Howard kind of shows everybody that top shelf production from the tight end position that maybe everybody thinks he can have. And I still think he can definitely produce at that level. But I almost wonder if this is the year that OJ Howard almost just kind of fades back a little bit. I think last year there was a lot of pressure on him. There's a lot of expectation on him and the entire team, to be honest with you. But I constantly go back to the appearance he had on the NFL Network during the previous offseason leading into the 2019 season. He went on there and said, he believes he could be a top 5 tight end in the NFL, and that's what he was preparing to do. And then he came into the season, and at times, when he was getting opportunities in the passing game, it looked to me like he was almost a guy trying a little too hard to make good on those words and to prove to everybody that he could be what everybody wants him to be. And then when he was in the passing, or when he was in pass blocking and he was staying in line, where people really aren't paying attention to him and there's not a whole lot of expectation, is really when he was at his best for this team. So I think it shows his versatility is still definitely there. I think what Rob Gronkowski really is going to bring to the table and teach OJ Howard is that you can still be great and have fun. That it's still a game, and even though you're out there trying to be the best tight end to ever play the game, that you can still go out there and try to be the best while enjoying yourself. And that's what Rob Gronkowski has embodied during his career more than anything. It's just a great player who comes to work every day, happy to be going to work, loving what he's doing. You saw when he retired. As soon as he stopped loving what he was doing every day, he went, he took that knee, he stepped into the shadows for a year. Now he's coming back and he's hotter than ever, and people have, all kinds of hype and excitement for him. I think OJ can look at that and say, look, if a guy like Rob Gronkowski can take a step back for a year into the shadows and kind of regroup himself, and come back at this stage in his career and still have all this excitement around him. A young guy like OJ Howard certainly has all the time in the
Yep.
world. Now, of course, I think you're going to have your breakout games from him, and that's going to make some daily fantasy players look like incredible geniuses if you find those matchups. Because as defenses try to match up against Rob Gronkowski, OJ is going to get even better matchups than he's ever had before in his career. And so I think you're going to get those burst games. But I don't know if this is the year that that OJ becomes the top 5 or even top 8 tight end in the NFL. And I don't think he necessarily needs to. I think that can happen in 2021 or even 2022 if
Yeah,
necessary.
especially with Gronk there, and Brady just loves to spread the ball around. So even
Right.
though it's a different offense, a different system, different players, Tom's the guy that's in control of the orchestra, and he's the one that's going to make sure that everybody. It's almost going to. I can still see sort of the McDaniels Belichick offense in Brady, where hey, maybe this week it's going to be OJ Howard, like you said, but then next week it's going to be Gronk, and then maybe this week it's Godwin, and then so I can see that happening with the Bucks, and I think you're right. I think if you take some Bucks this year, including Evans, I think you're going to have some weeks where you're going to have some great weeks, and you're going to have some weeks where you're going to be frustrated.
Exactly. And that's always been the bugaboo about drafting New England Patriots. Back for the past few years anyway, the New England Patriots skill position players have been on my do not draft
Yeah.
list because you can't roll into any week. Even Julian Edelman, you can't roll
No.
in any week 100% confident that that person is going to give you enough points to help you win your matchup. So I don't know. Maybe the Buccaneers are going to have to enter that do not draft list for me
Maybe.
as well. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, if Tom is anything, he's going to take what the defense gives him. And if the defense gives him Scotty Miller 12 times in one game for 140 and 2
Hey,
touchdowns, that's what he's going to
that's
take.
an interesting name as we take a look at some of the depth guys, because he's had his rookie season. He was one of my sleepers, deep sleepers that I wanted to talk about last year in the draft because of his production at Bowling Green, that nobody was talking about whether or not he could even be drafted. I think people were probably
Right.
surprised he was drafted, but he was so productive for a school like Bowling Green that you had to keep an eye on him. If you looked at tape, you saw some interesting things there. And now you've got the correlation of a former MAC player in Edelman. Has that been, I'm assuming that has been a talk about, can Scotty Miller be the next Julian Edelman?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, it's definitely been a talk. Since Tom Brady hit the roster, that's the first thing everybody did is who's the next Julian Edelman? Who's the next Wes Welker? Who's that guy that's going to fill that role? And it's got to be Scotty Miller. I mean, Chris Godwin can work in the slot, with the best of them, but he doesn't have the short area quickness and burst that a guy like Scotty Miller does. And Scotty's the one who matches that description the most. And something a little bit more interesting, and Tom Brady's social media game is on point. He's social media smart, especially for a guy in the 40s. He might be the smartest social media guy in his 40s in this country, to be quite honest with you. He sent out an Instagram post not that long ago. I can't remember the exact wording of it. Basically, it was, who wants the ball type of thing. And Scotty Miller was the wide receiver that he tagged at the very top of that
Okay.
post. Not Mike Evans, not Chris Godwin, not OJ Howard, not Rob Gronkowski. It was Scotty Miller. And I mean, the excitement, at least, in and around the building and the team is very palpable about what Scotty Miller might be able to do with a guy like Tom Brady. We'll just see if it actually pans out on the field. But I'll tell you right now, in my fantasy league of record, as I like to say, the one that I focus on the most and I kind of hang my hat on, I've got Scotty Miller stashed on my bench.
There you go. And that's like a lottery pick for Scotty Miller. I mean, because if he does turn out, of course, to have that type of a season or 2 or 3, it's just going to be one of those deals where it's like winning the lottery. It's like an unbelievable godsend, and it would prove just how certain players can end up with just obscure careers, and other players like an Edelman. Because look, if there's no Tom Brady for Julian Edelman, and Edelman is on any other team in the NFL, we don't even know who Julian Edelman is. He probably isn't even
Very
in the
likely,
league
yeah.
anymore. But it just shows you how that works out, and that's going to be quite interesting. I'm going to be very intrigued to see how everybody handles Scott Miller in these fantasy drafts. Okay, what about Tyler Johnson and Justin Watson? Because Watson was taken in the 5th round a couple of years ago. That's another guy that people might be thinking about. Hey, could he be an Edelman type guy? I still think Miller fits the mold better. And Tyler Johnson, though, love Tyler Johnson. I was a big Tyler Johnson fan last year with Minnesota. touted him the week of the Penn State game, in which he went out and actually performed credible in their big upset win over the Nittany Lions. Uh, what about Tyler Johnson? Because he has the talent to eventually be like a number two, a really good number two receiver.
Yeah, I think his potential is, what is the famous saying? The ceiling is the roof, or whatever. The sky's the limit for a guy like Tyler Johnson, right? I mean, everybody was excited when he got landed, when he got nabbed by the Buccaneers, especially in the fifth round. I mean, I think it's such a great value pick for this organization, and I think he's got a lot of potential. Bruce Arians kind of let it slip a little bit. Not really official word, but kind of a little bit maybe of a Freudian slip, but that Tyler Johnson might be a little dinged up. So I don't know if he's been able to turn a whole lot of heads in
Hmm,
training camp just
okay.
yet. But he's got plenty of time before the season gets here. Justin Watson is a guy though who has been getting some attention in training camp and has been doing some good things. Bruce, I think it was Bruce who said that he came in looking even faster than he usually is, and Justin's a guy coming out of the Ivy League, 6 feet plus, a tall guy, long guy with a lot of length, and he was known a little bit for some of his speed. So if he's coming in even faster this year, then that speaks a lot to his preparation for the year as he's getting older and as he's getting more, used to being a professional football player and what he's able to do. And I think it's huge for him because when you look at that wide receiver depth for the Buccaneers, you've got your top two of Evans and Godwin, and then you've got Scotty Miller, who I think most people kind of have penciled in as the primary number three receiver, but then Tyler Johnson expected to kind of come in and get some snaps as that third guy on the field as well. And then Justin Watson is there. There's some undrafted free agents that people are a little bit excited for. They just brought Jaden Mickens back onto the roster. He's got some speed and he's a little bit quicker in the short area part of the field. So Justin's really got to carve out a role for himself on this team, whether it be special teams and offense or just special teams. But he's got to do something a little bit to show that he has some staying power, because right now there's not really anything he does that you don't get with other players on the roster, including OJ Howard.
Now, at running back, at the depth situation, we talked about McCoy and Jones, but unfortunately, both Vaughn and Calais are on COVID, uh, on the COVID list. So, what is the status? Are they out for the year? Is that what the COVID situation is for both of those kids?
So Calais has been
He
activated.
has.
Vaughn,
Okay.
yeah, Vaughn was seen working out. I don't know if we ever got a hard confirmation. I want to say we got a hard confirmation that he's back as
Okay.
well. I don't think either one of them is going to be a long-term problem at all. And I think that you fully expect those guys to come back. To me, really, I think TJ Logan and Raymond Calais is the battle to watch in training camp. And that's really where not having these preseason games is going to hurt the Buccaneers' decision-making ability, because both of those guys expected to be special teams
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
specialists, and without getting to see them really. I mean, you can go live, against your own team, but I don't know if you really want to do too many live reps in punt coverage, especially not kickoff coverage. You're just asking for problems. So I mean, it's going to be a little bit difficult for this coaching staff to choose, what happens. And then Dare Gubawale is kind of there in the mix as well as kind of the forgotten man. But I mean, with LaShawn McCoy, Ronald Jones, Keyshawn
Yeah.
Vaughn, they've got a tough decision ahead of them on which running backs they keep active. I think Raymond Calais maybe, depending on how TJ Logan looks speed wise, agility wise, in the training camp, maybe Raymond Calais starts the year on the practice squad. But then if TJ Logan struggles or fails to show some spark in the special teams game, then maybe he gets released and Raymond Calais
Yeah,
gets called
because
up.
Vaughn, and we talked about it around the draft. I mean, that kid has got the potential. May not happen this year because of the inability to work out as much as he would like as a rookie, but and of course the COVID also. But next
Right.
year, that's the kind of talent he's got. The kind of talent that we got to keep an eye on him. Who knows if McCoy will even be there? But maybe Vaughn will give the team an opportunity to say, "Hey, we've got a nice 1-2 punch with Jones and with Vaughn."
Yeah, and I think that's another reason LaShawn McCoy was brought in, not just because Keyshawn Vaughn started training camp on that COVID list, but because of, like you said, that lack of, the
Yeah.
OTAs, the rookie camps, all that stuff. That stuff is really important, especially for these NFL rookies. I mean, they're coming from college programs that feed them what they want them to be fed. They have, much better conditioning programs as far as keeping them in line and keeping them on the straight and narrow. As a professional football player now, you've got all this money, you're on your own. There's nobody sitting there by your side every day saying, hey, make sure you eat the carrots, put down the carrot cake. And not saying that Keyshawn Vaughn necessarily doesn't know how to take care of his body, but I think there's just something to learn from
Sure.
every first year player. This is kind of a natural part of the learning curve. So I think that's a big thing, and being able to put Ronald Jones out there, LaShawn McCoy, and Keyshawn Vaughn, keep all three of them relatively fresh, and have all of them available throughout the game, throughout the season. Really, I think is going to be incredibly valuable. And then I think 2021, assuming we can get all this back to normal and get a full off season, full OTAs, full young camps, maybe the NFL allows a few more mini camps next year because of what happened this year. I think Keyshawn Vaughn's really going to have a big opportunity to grow between year one and year
Okay,
two.
now speaking of special teams, I'm not so sure there's been a special teams unit over the past decade that has had as many issues as Tampa Bay. And covering them. So I was surprised that there's no competition right now that I see in camp for punter. That surprises me. Maybe there's some sort of underlying stat that I have no way I don't know of why the Bucks feel confident that Pinion is the guy. He didn't have a great year. Matt Gay, okay, he's a rookie. You can give him another chance. I got no problem with that. But boy, this is a unit that just must at least even just be middle of the road.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think the bigger emphasis I think for the Buccaneers is on the return game themselves, and then on their kicking game as far as their field goals are concerned. Matt Gay, I think Matt Gay had a relatively solid rookie year, I think, but there were definitely some games where he left more to be desired, especially that New York Giants game. I mean, that's a game where just across the board, the Buccaneers absolutely should have sent the Giants home back to New York with a loss. Instead, they come away with the loss at home to a Saquon Barkley less,
Yeah.
essentially goes out in the early or the middle part of the first half. I mean, really, they should have just run away with that game. And at the end of it, because of turnovers, because of mistakes on defense, and because of the missed field goal at the end of the game, the Buccaneers walk away with a loss. And then there were some other disappointing moments for Matt Gay. I think the eyes are going to be on him a little bit more, and then on the return game. That's why they drafted a guy like Raymond Clay, because they want to get that return game underway. Especially you talk about a quarterback like Tom Brady who doesn't have that arm strength that we talked about. I mean, if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and you're down 3 points, 4 points, 7 points in the fourth quarter, and you've got 2.5 minutes left. Do you want the ball at your own 15, or do you want the ball at your own 45, even maybe on the other side, plus side of the field? Yes, you have Tom Brady, but Tom's not going to give you that 70-yard bomb like we've already talked about. So you're going to need time for him to run down the field, and you may not have that time in every single game.
Okay, last few minutes, let's talk about the defense. And there are still some key veterans on defense, whether it's Ndamukong Suh, Jason Pierre-Paul, Levante David, huge addition of Shaquille Barrett last year. And, of course, Devin White, turning our attention to the younger versions, Barrett and then Devin White. I'm sure the Bucks were expecting a breakout couple of seasons from him after being drafted pretty high last year in the first round. I'm very interested to see how the secondary does more than anything, because there's a lot of draft capital spent in that secondary over the last few years. Absolutely love Antoine Winfield. We talked about that during our draft coverage. But yeah, there's a lot of different a lot of different pieces there in the secondary. How do you think it's going to work out?
I'm cautiously optimistic. Add to it, the Buccaneers just released a former second-round draft pick, and MJ Stewart. They waived him. The Cleveland Browns end up picking him up. MJ, a guy that they tried a safety slot on the perimeter, it just didn't work out anywhere, and he doesn't really have the size or the physicality, I don't think, to turn into a linebacker like a guy like Mark Barron did. I mean, the talent is evident. Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean, Antoine Winfield, even Andrew Adams, Mike Edwards. Jordan Whitehead is such an underrated strong safety. I really kind of hope this year, Levante David is being talked about as the most underrated player on pretty much every major network and every team representative. So I don't think Levante is really underrated anymore. I think people know who he is.
But underrated how?
Well, he's been.
You mean because the Bucks haven't been very good?
Top 100. Yeah, okay. Exactly. I mean, he just hasn't gotten the attention, but I think people, as they're shining a light on the Buccaneers, are realizing just how good Levante David is.
We all know how good Levante David is.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Jordan Whitehead maybe takes the place as, when you look at the defense, maybe Jordan Whitehead is probably the most underrated Buccaneers defender now. I mean, so much focus was spent on the free safety position. Everybody kind of missed that there was pretty much no focus spent on the strong safety position. So if the strong safety position got almost no attention in mock draft speculation, free agency speculation, why is that? Well, it's because the Buccaneers are confident in the guy they have, and that's Jordan Whitehead.
Interesting. So Jordan Whitehead's the guy to keep an eye on as far as sleeper type of player, a young player. What about, you got a couple of those draft picks, the three of them actually from 2019. Which one of them do you think has a little bit more of the goods, Dean, Edwards, or Murphy-Bunting?
I think it's Jamel Dean. I think Jamel Dean's got that perimeter defender. He's got that dog in him. I think he's going to have that ability to turn into, not necessarily this year, but I think eventually, if he stays healthy and stays on the path, he's going to turn into a legit lockdown defender. Sean Murphy Bunting, I think he's more designed for the slot. I think that's kind of where he's going to make his money, and there's no shame in that. I mean, in today's NFL, everybody
Yep.
says that slot defender is essentially a starting quarterback, so really no shade there whatsoever. But I think the outside defender is always going to get the sexier looks, the better highlights. Mike Edwards, I think he's just kind of a Swiss Army guy. You know, you can put him back there as a free safety if you need
Okay.
to. You can play him in sort of a strong safety type of hybrid. I mean, he can come down in the box if he needs to. Don't want him to live there, but he can take a snap there or two, especially if you're going up against a running back like Kenyon Drake, maybe. Don't want to see him facing a guy like David Johnson. But you know, if it's a Kenyon Drake type of running back, even an Alvin Kamara, he can probably hold his own if he takes the right angles. But I think he's just going to be a guy who kind of fills in where he's needed and then
And
contributes
what
on
about the
special
health of
teams.
Justin Evans?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm not going to be optimistic about Justin Evans' future until I see him on the field taking full reps with contact. I just, you know, I don't know if it's bad, you know, advice that he got. I don't know if it was just nerves or not, because you know he had the injury, he decided not to have the surgery, try to let it heal
Hmm.
naturally. That didn't go well, and then by the time he did have the surgery, it was almost like too little, too late. And excuse me, some frustration from the franchise, understandably, for those types of things. You always want your players to take the route that's going to get them back on the field faster, but not only did it not get them on the field faster, it may have ended up actually causing so much damage that you may never see him
Wow.
again. Kendall Beckwith, his career is pretty much done in the NFL, I think. Justin Evans not quite to that level as Kendall Beckwith got to, but to me, I think it's getting close. We'll see what
So
happens.
that means we're likely to see a Whitehead Winfield starting duo.
Yeah, I mean, you might even see Andrew Adams. Excuse
Andrew
me,
Adams.
Andrew
Okay.
Adams.
He's another
Yeah, he
sleeper to
was. I
keep
mean,
an eye
he
on. A deep sleeper.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a good player, good young player. He actually took more reps at the starting free safety position last year than any other Buccaneer did, and I think he did fairly well. You know, not Pro Bowl level or All Pro level, but I think he held his own. That front seven coming back is obviously huge, and that's going to help any free safety, any secondary, really, especially young secondary. So all of those guys coming back, and if they can all stay healthy, JPP wasn't even there for almost half the season last year. He's going to be there for a full season again if he can stay healthy. So Andrew Adams, I think, could very well start the season, especially without the advantage of preseason games. They're not going to get again. They're not going to get to see Antoine Winfield against live competition, so they may go with the younger veteran. He's been in for a few years now. He's not the aged veteran that some people talk about, but he's been in for a few years. He's been around. Picked off Cam Newton a handful of times. So I think it's a real possibility to see Andrew Adams start the year as the starting free safety. But if Antoine Winfield can capitalize on his talent
Yeah.
and show that NFL pedigree that he has from his father, you know, week 4 or 5, you can see him
Now,
take over.
this was a 4-3 personnel team for a long time until
Mhm.
last year. Of course, Bowles comes in, a 3-4 guy. How does that? Is the team still maybe a year or two away from transitioning fully over to 3-4 players that fit the system better?
I think they're there right now. I mean, I think you look at their outside linebackers, you know, those edge defenders, they work great in a top Bulls type system. I mean, Jason Pierre-Paul thrived in a 3-4 defense for years. In fact, part of the reason that the Giants were looking to move him when they did is because they were swapping to a 4-3 and they didn't think he would work out. Buccaneers swoop in, grab him, and, you know, a year or so later, they're moving to a 3-4, and JPP is, you know, on top of the NFL again. Shaq Barrett obviously is making money there. Levante David moving into the inside as an off ball linebacker. He's so versatile that you never know as a quarterback, as an offense, what he's going to do, where he's going to be. And he uses that to his advantage. Devin White showed when he was healthy last year in his rookie year what he could really turn into. And I think he takes a big leap this year. And Dominican Sue, you know, is just doing Dominican Sue things. Vita Vea really took a step forward last year in that 3-4. Will Golston, again, an unsung hero, you know, definitely maybe an underrated guy, just kind of doing that dirty work in there, eating up blocks, clogging holes, and making sure the running backs had nowhere to go. So I think they're there. I think they're
Okay,
successful in
cool.
the 3-4. I think the question is keeping it together because Ndamukong Suh's on a 1-year deal. Shaquille Barrett on the franchise tag. Levante David's in the last year of his contract. The Buccaneers have one of the lowest amounts of salary
Yep.
cap room right now, and the cap is expected to shrink next year because of what's happening with COVID and the profit margins. So the Buccaneers start off with such low cap space, and it shrinks in 2021. It doesn't look good to keeping all of those guys.
Yeah, and look, likely, no matter how good Levante David has been, if it's a choice, if you have to choose between Barrett and David, you got to go with the younger kid.
Yeah, that's a tough decision to make, and no Buccaneers
No,
fan is going to want to see
I
that team
know.
make that pick. But if you got to go with the off-ball linebacker or the edge defender, I mean, you got Levante or you got Devin White sitting there showing, you know, it looks like, you know, barring, you know, any type of catastrophic collapse in his second season, he already looks like he's ready to be that number one off-ball linebacker for a defense. Shaq Barrett, I mean, if he has another Defensive Player of the Year type season, you can't just draft that. You can
No,
draft a second
those are
off-ball
hard to
linebacker.
find.
You can't draft a Defensive Player of the Year
Yeah.
edge.
Lastly, some of the other young players.
Mhm.
Anthony Nelson was a fourth rounder, a linebacker. This year, you drafted Khalil Davis in the sixth round, play up front, and two undrafted rookies: Michael Divinity, the kid from LSU at linebacker, and Parnell Motley, the corner from Oklahoma.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I love all those guys. I love all those names. Excited to see Anthony Nelson coming back from injury, see what he can do. And a lot of people kind of expected him to give maybe JPP a push, closer to going out the door, not completely, but a little bit closer. Unfortunately, injuries, hampered his rookie season, but he was showing a lot of good things. Parnell Motley, I definitely think he's got a strong chance to make the active roster there in that cornerback room. Again, MJ Stewart leaving. Ryan Smith is definitely just a special teams guy. He's not getting on the field on defense unless they absolutely have to. So a guy like Motley is certainly a name to keep an eye on. And then Michael Divinity, I mean, out of all the undrafted free agents, he might have been one of my favorites going into the undrafted free agent session. And when I found out the Buccaneers didn't have him, that's a great move. And I mean, if he can turn some of that talent that he flashed at LSU into professional development, he's got LSU Tigers on that team to help lead him in the right direction, and a great coach in Todd Bowles. I mean, you hate to say it, and Buccaneers fans are going to hate me for saying it out loud, but he could start to show flashes of things that could convince the Buccaneers that they can afford to walk away from Levante
Yeah,
David.
well, that's actually the hope. I mean, that's what you really want. And then you,
I mean, really, at the end of the day,
yeah.
but if you own a 54 jersey, you
No,
don't want to
no,
see it.
but you'll never get rid of that one. That's for
Yeah, yeah.
sure. No.
Hopefully not.
And then you also hope that, well, maybe if things go really well with this team, that's the thing that you would have to consider. You're light, and you're negotiating this, and you're saying, okay, we're coming off a playoff year. We could be a Super Bowl team next year, Levante. You've been here all of these years. Do you
Uh,
really want to leave now? Come on, give us a discount, a hometown discount.
I mean, listen, our site manager at BucksNation.com, Gil Arcia, always says, "Don't worry about the salary cap." And I think, and Jason, like who the Buccaneers staff is one of the best at managing the salary cap. And I mean, we've seen the New Orleans Saints kick the can down the road with Drew Brees for so many years now, and they pull out signings like Emmanuel Sanders when it looks like they can't even re-sign their own guys. And then not only do they re-sign all their guys, but then they bring in a middle tier wide receiver to pair with Michael Thomas. So if the Saints can pull off a move like that, the Buccaneers can certainly, be capable of pulling off a move like keeping all these guys. And then, yeah, Levante. I mean, listen, if it's as much as maybe taking a 2-year deal with some prorated money, moving to the back end of the contract so you can play in this first year or this second year with Tom Brady and maybe get a Lombardi. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to at least consider it if you're Levante.
Yeah, because I think I noticed like a few years ago that Light was one of the first GMs that started the trend of just giving out one year deals. Guaranteed. Nothing was guaranteed after that first year. And because I was
Yep.
looking over contracts of almost every team, and I would look over the Bucks and I'd go, well, look, there's like no dead money here. He could like
Yep.
change the team every year if he wanted to. And now almost every GM obviously is trying to do that with their teams. But Light was one of the first guys that did it, I noticed.
Oh, most definitely. And I mean, Donovan Smith is a name to look at. Donovan Smith is online, I think, to make 12.5 million next year, I want to say. None of that is guaranteed. And so if they move on from him after this season, it's all, there's no
No
caps, there's
dead
no
money.
dead cap
Yeah.
money there. So that's 12.5 million they can pick up. You spend a first round draft pick, especially if you get a playoff spot. You spend a late first round draft pick on a new offensive tackle, maybe move Tristan
That's
Wirfs
right.
to that left side, plug in your rookie to the right side. After the rookie salary cap wage hits, you still net about somewhere between $8 and $10 million in gain cap space, and your offensive line maybe gets better. To be
You
honest
never
with
know. I mean, look, the only other free agent, really, one of the only, three free agents you signed outside the organization was Joe Haig. He could slide over to right
you.
tackle into 2021.
Yeah, you may not even need to draft a guy,
That's
and you can
right.
go out there and maybe draft another wide receiver or something, whatever they want to do.
David, how's everything going with the Locked On Bucks podcast?
Oh, we're still plugging away. I just we were talking off air. I just made a move. I just moved from New York to Virginia, beginning my post-military career. And so James held down the fort for a week while I was doing that. So I greatly appreciate him doing that. But yeah, Locked On Bucks still plugging along. We were at 3 episodes a week for about a month there, with no training or with no OTAs going on. We knocked it down to 3 a week, but now we're right back up to 5 a week, and we'll be there until for the foreseeable
And
future.
Bucks Nation?
Bucks Nation is still churning away as well. I'm actually going to increase my contributions to BuckNation.com here moving forward. Probably start writing a little bit more than I have been over the last couple of years, and just deliver all the Tom Brady news, Rob Gronkowski news, but also the news on all these other guys, the guys like Jordan Whitehead that we've been talking about.
David, thanks for your service, as always.
I appreciate you, Greg.
Thanks for doing this, and we look forward to talking to you real early in the season. No question about it. I want to talk to you. Who's the first opponent?
New Orleans
wow.
Saints.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you. Maybe we'll talk to you that week before or after. I
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
it, David, as always.